This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion.
You want to hear a crazy story? In my infinite wisdom, somewhere I believe in 1997 or 1998, I registered, I don't know how many domain names of famed hedge fund managers. All the ones that you could name, I registered. Now, I wasn't stupid. I was not a domain squatter. I was not holding these domains hostage. I had the idea of creating news and information sites about these individuals and their strategies, not unlike what I did with Turtle Trader. And before I ever knew him, I registered the domain name edsekota.com, the famous trader, the one profiled in my book, Trend Following. I didn't do anything with it. I don't think I had a website. I might have had like a one-page bio site or something like that. I can't recall. But I think there was actually no site up. Then one day I got an email from a contact. I did not know this individual. He was representing Ed. And he said Ed would like his domain name. I thought to myself, okay, why not? Now, back in the day, you had to sign a piece of paper and put it in the mail. So I remember signing a piece of paper from Network Solutions, I think it was, dropping it in the mail and thinking nothing of it. And I just gave him the domain name. I had paid, a couple $100 or something for a couple years to own it. And I just sent him the ownership. I didn't think anything of it. A couple weeks later, same individual contacted me on behalf of Ed and said, hey, would you like to come down and have a conversation with Ed? I'm thinking to myself, well, sure, why not? He's a quite well-known guy. Why not? I took the flight down to the Caribbean, the island they were staying at that time. Had a conversation with Ed. Me and Ed sitting in a little beachside cafe. I think he was in shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops. I may have been dressed a little bit better, but it was low-key Caribbean drums cool. Sipping a beer, first time meeting Ed Sekota. Now, I know I've said versions of this story on this podcast before, but Ed was curious about me, my research, what I was doing, and he wanted to know, like his first question almost, very direct, he wanted to know why I thought Richard Dennis had selected the turtles. What was Dennis looking for when he selected the turtle traders? Now, as a quick side note, the turtle traders, which the story of my second book, The Complete Turtle Trader. Now, at the time, there was no book. This was 5 or 6 years before the book. So he wanted to know, like a test, what does this guy know? And I said I thought Richard Dennis was looking for people who could think in terms of odds, a risk management thinking. I made a great example of it today in 2020, to wear a mask or not wear a mask. Unbelievably political right now. Now, here's the way you should think about it from a risk management standpoint, an odds standpoint. You can go out there right now and you can find science that will say masks are good and masks are bad. Okay, that's not very helpful. But you can also look around pretty quickly and find out that doctors like to use masks. You can look at Asia and you could say, gosh, Asia likes to use masks. So if the science is in dispute, it's not a science issue anymore because we can't resolve it right now. It's a life or death issue. It becomes a risk management issue. The risk management is what is the cost to wearing the mask? And can it potentially help you to some degree? Now, of course, the answer is yes. Does that mean it's foolproof? No, it doesn't mean it's foolproof. That's not the point. It's risk management. And this, I think, was what Dennis was looking for in his students. People that could think clearly about risk, about odds, chance, etc. Now, back in the day when Ed asked me that question, there was no corona, no COVID example to tell him about, but he seemed satisfied with my Richard Dennis was looking for students who could think in terms of odds. We had a nice little conversation. We went on to become friends. We don't get a chance to see each other too often or speak too much, but I will always have the fond memory of having him and Larry Height on the stage together in Chicago, I believe 2012, 2013. What a fabulous experience. Just from the random registration of a domain name in 1997 to a 2012 interview in Chicago. What's the point? There's no straight line. There's no degree you get from college to pull off what I pulled off. And that's just a one-off example. Most of my life is that exact strategy. Just go. Take steps. Take action. Don't be a jerk. Don't try to hurt anybody. Don't try to rip anybody off. Take steps. Take action. And it landed me this wonderfully interesting connection with one of the most famed traders in our time. Now, I bring this up today because I noticed that The Complete Turtle Trader, my book on the story of Richard Dennis and the turtles, was ranked about 10,000 on Amazon yesterday. Now, this book came out a few years ago, more than a decade ago. Of course, I wrote it, so I know what's in there. And I think for the discriminating reader, it's timeless. It's a timeless lesson. And that rank of 10,000 with, gosh, who knows how many books are on Amazon today? 10 million? So I feel very lucky to have a book that ranks so damn high, that has staying power. And the staying power, and this also connects to Ed Sakota as well, because Ed does a lot of teaching. But the staying power is all about nurture trumping nature. Look, so many people believe that you are born with it. Whatever it might be, you're born with it. I believe the turtle experiment, the turtle trading story, proved that to be incorrect. Because this famous trader, Richard Dennis, put ads in the paper and took students off the street, trained them, and they made a boatload of money. Now, at the same time, in academic circles, guys like Anders Ericsson at Florida State University, a guy who has appeared on this podcast, were doing the research, and they were showing that it is all about a deliberate practice, that no matter what you want to learn, you can figure it out. Now, you've got to have an open mind. You've got to be willing to do it no matter what. You've got to be persistent. You can't quit. I recall in Ericsson's book, Peak, he discussed London taxi drivers. And London taxi drivers, for those of you who don't know, and for those of you who have not been to London, they have to memorize the streets. Now, maybe in this age of political correctness and fragile people, it's changed. I hope not. But London taxi drivers have to memorize the streets. That was part of the deal. They were able to go in and do the scans, the imaging of brains of taxi drivers in London to see how the muscle in the brain had taken shape while they were active taxi drivers. So while these guys were active, their brains actually took on an increased muscle shape, if you want to call it that. I'm not a doctor, so you can kick my ass and yell and scream if I described it the wrong way. But their brains actually took on a different shape. in certain quadrants of the brain. And the crazy thing was, when they stopped being a taxi driver, guess what happened to their brains? Atrophy. Just like if you stop working out. Look, I'm a guy over 50. I can do the splits. Not because I'm weird, because I practice. And I like having that ability. And it never gets easier. And you got to keep doing it. As far as I can tell, I'm going to be able to do it for a long, long time to come because I can keep doing it and I can keep practicing. And that's ultimately the great lesson of the turtle story. Yes, they were taught trend following rules. Yes, dentists wanted people that could think in terms of odds. But don't kid yourself like some of these emails that I get that somehow or another dentists selected only the savants. And that's why it worked out. Now, maybe Jerry Parker will argue with me, and he's obviously a very bright guy. A very bright guy who has done extremely well. A guy you can listen to on this podcast. And if you have not listened to Jerry Parker on this podcast, perhaps there's something wrong with you. But. Big picture, the reason people love this turtle story, the reason that book continues to sell, that book of mine, it's nurture trumping nature. Now, the crazy thing about this story is even though I feel like I put down the definitive story, all the good things, all the bad things, the things that you didn't know, I put it all down. But it's amazing how many people still, to this day, even when they've got the damn book in front of them, they can't get it. They can't grasp it. Something is a block in their mind to where they think, no, whoever they hired, that means I could not do it. And when I bring up Anders Ericsson and all of his work with deliberate practice, they go to cognitive dissonance because they don't want to lose the argument. They don't want to admit that they can do it, and it's going to take hard work. Now, to go back to Ed for a moment, and this is a little blurry because we're talking 2001 or 2, I think 2001. I'm down in the islands, and at the same time Ed was there, one of the turtles was there. Now, this particular turtle was held out, not by Ed, but by others, was held out as some kind of, wizard. I did not know anything about him at all, except maybe a brief mention in the Wall Street Journal from 12 or 13 years earlier. So somebody said to me, do you want to go meet with this guy, this turtle? Sure, I'm in the islands. Why not? Let's go meet with the guy. I went down to some bay with a beach. It was kind of like wading water. And I hung out with this guy. I had never met him before or anything. But it was such a contrast to meeting Ed Seykota. Ed Seykota, you just knew could look through you. You knew there was something about that guy that was magical. You could feel it. Now, I'm not saying Ed made $1 billion. Maybe he did. But you just knew there was something about Ed Seykota that was really cool. And you could feel it. It was a presence. And when you get a chance to meet those people in your life and you see that presence, if you're not an idiot, it affects you. It gives you confidence. It spurs you along. Now, this other guy that I met, this turtle, during this same trip, oh my gosh, it was the exact opposite. Now, conceptually at the time, these two men had these reputations in the public space. Ed's was a lot stronger. He had been featured in the Market Wizards book by Jack Schwager. And he had that classic line of, and I'm paraphrasing, everybody gets what they want. So if people want to be a knucklehead and do drugs, they get that. If people want to be successful, they get that. A very Zen thinking and philosophy with Ed Seykota. But again, this other guy, this turtle that I met at the time, he was the polar opposite. You knew meeting this guy, this turtle, who was held out as successful, you just knew meeting him for the first time, it was all 100% bullshit. 100%. You just knew that this guy was doing nothing. It was painfully obvious by appearance, by voice, by confidence. Everything about the guy screamed, blinking red light, something's off here. That was my gut feel. Within minutes, he was telling me about starting an airline. Now, I was thinking, did this guy have enough money for dinner? And he's talking about starting an airline. It was grandiose insanity on display. And occasionally I'll think back, like I am today, to think about how those two experiences affected me. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody needs to have a ton of money to be a star in their thinking. It doesn't mean that at all. But there's got to be some there. And you've got to have your eyes wide open. Now, the funny thing is, this guy that I met, this turtle that I met at that time, who was held out as the most successful turtle, clearly not the most successful turtle. My book laid that to rest. History has laid that to rest. And I think his at least 3 mugshots of jail time that he served in the last 5 or 6 years has laid that to rest. Now, I'm not saying that I was in possession of a crystal ball when I met this guy in 2001 to say that it did not surprise me that he ended up spending time in jail. But it did not surprise me at all. Not at all. So why do I go down that path? Because there's still people out there that believe that it was all about some natural ability. It wasn't. Yeah, Rich Dennis could select decently smart people, and he did. But they didn't all win. Now, some of them did exceptionally well. Jerry Parker, Liz Cheval, Tom Shanks, Paul Raybar. These men and women made millions. They are trading legends. Now, maybe they're not as well known as George Soros or Stanley Druckenmiller, but they really did something special. But there were people in the group that did not do something special. And you would expect that. You would expect that some people, even if given all of the rules, even if given all of the confidences, that just because of human nature, they would struggle, give up, become a fuck job in their life, go off in some crazy ass direction. You would expect that. And it happened. Of course, not for the majority of the turtles. The majority of the turtles did really well. I'm probably one of the few people that actually has all of their filing documents with the government, their original track records. I did my homework. I went through these people. I was so curious to see, to prove it to myself that it was real. Now, let me give one more diversion on this story. The turtles were taught rules, trend-following rules. But there was also a certain psychology they learned. And you can't get one without the other. You don't just get the rules without the mindset. If you got the rules and no mindset, you're screwed. If you got the mindset and no rules, you're screwed. Now, I got an email the other day from somebody, one of these complaining types, whiners. And he's telling me that my books go on and on and on, and there's no information, and it's not valuable, and it's not useful. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I've sold a lot of copies. Now, that in of itself doesn't mean shit, don't get me wrong. But I've sold a lot of copies, and a lot of influential people, extremely influential people, extremely influential traders like the books, appreciate the books. Now, that's a hint to something. But this guy, He was bent. He didn't see the rules that he wanted. And he told me that the psychology and the philosophy was useless to him, not important. I don't get that. The reason they gave Daniel Kahneman the Nobel Prize for prospect theory was all about the psychology, the thinking, the philosophy. If you don't have that, you're going to fail. Like the crazy guy who ended up going to jail, the turtle who went to jail. He didn't have that. I don't know that that makes him a good guy or a bad guy. The evidence is out there. I know what I saw. I know what I learned. Not my cup of tea, not my kind of person. I'd much rather be around the Ed Zakotas of the world, the Larry Heights of the world, the David Hardings of the world, the Jerry Parkers of the world. Those guys are much more interesting to me than crazy people. They'd end up going to jail. And I'm sure most of you agree with me. I wanted to share today because I think these perspectives are good for people who don't have the chance to see behind the curtain. Because once you go behind the curtain, you take a look at how things work. Sometimes they work exactly like you imagine they work. And other times, there's a surprise. And that surprise changes you. It's kind of like politics today, politics in America. People can watch all the cable TV they want. But when you go behind the scenes and you see how legislation is made, you see how legislation is enforced, and you see how congressmen and senators chase young girls in Washington, D.C. every night as sport, then you really get an idea of how their world works. Of course, my point is you've got to get behind the scenes. You've got to understand all of the details. Now, maybe you can be like the guy who emailed me and said, I don't need all this other stuff. Just give me the rules. That's all I need. How much you want to bet on that guy? How much you want to bet on somebody who says that trading psychology is immaterial to them, is irrelevant to them, is not needed? Forget trading, entrepreneur, business, you name it. The person that tells you that mindset, and by the way, check out Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. The person that tells you that mindset is irrelevant. God, I got to give Zuckerberg credit, right? Because the person that tells you that mindset is irrelevant, that's why Facebook gave us the block. Now, I just want Google to give me a block that's as effective as Facebook's. Because Google block on their email is not the same thing. Because I got to tell you, all I want in my life for the rest of my life is to engage with people who really want to get there. The whiners, the criers, the people that got excuses, the people that want to deny that mindset is so damn important. I got no time in the day for that.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.